It was January 2009. Novak Djokovic walked into Melbourne Park as the defending Australian Open champion, 21 years old, swaggering, confident, expected to dominate. Just 12 months earlier, he had announced himself to the world by beating Lleyton Hewitt, David Ferrer, Roger Federer, and Jo-Wilfried Tsonga on his way to his maiden Grand Slam title. Now he was supposed to build on that momentum. But what followed instead would nearly destroy his reputation. The Melbourne heat was brutal for this quarterfinals. Over 35 degrees on the thermometer, but it felt closer to 40. It was the kind that made the court shimmer. Djokovic faced Andy Roddick, a man who thrived on toughness, on showing no weakness. 2-1 down and drenched in sweat, Djokovic struggled to breathe. He bent over between points, gasping, clutching his stomach. And finally, at 6-7, 6-4, 6-2, 2-1, he walked to the net and retired. The defending champion had quit. And in that moment, everything changed. The crowd was stunned, the commentators speechless. Roddick, respectful but bewildered, moved on. But around the tennis world, the whispers grew louder. The same ones that had been following Djokovic for years. Whispers that he was fragile, that he couldn't handle the grind, that he was brilliant until things got tough. For Djokovic, this wasn't just another defeat. It was a public unraveling, a champion exposed under the harshest Australian sun. That retirement in Melbourne wasn't the first time Novak Djokovic's body had betrayed him. It was just the moment everyone stopped giving him the benefit of the doubt. Because by 2009, this was becoming a pattern. In Paris, back in 2005, a teenage Djokovic retired against Guillermo Coria, struggling with cramps. A year later, he quit midway through a French Open quarterfinal against Rafael Nadal, citing back pain and breathing trouble. At Wimbledon 2007, blisters forced him out of a semifinal. In Monte Carlo and at the Davis Cup the following year, he couldn't finish either. And by the time he pulled out against Roddick in 2009, it wasn't an isolated incident. It had become a regular occurrence with Novak. Blisters, breathing issues, cramps, dizziness. The reasons changed, but the story stayed the same. And it didn't go unnoticed. The year before, at the 2008 US Open, Andy Roddick had mocked Djokovic's list of supposed ailments. He told reporters before his clash with Novak, "I've got to feel good. He's got about 16 injuries right now, a back and a hip and a cramp, bird flu, anthrax, SARS, common cough and cold." It was a joke that landed hard because everyone got it. To them, Djokovic wasn't the toughest guy on tour. He was the one who always seemed to have something wrong. Federer, not one to make stinging remarks about fellow players on the tour, did not hold back either. After that 2009 Australian Open quarterfinal, the one where Djokovic retired against Roddick, Federer had this to say: "I'm almost in favor of saying if you're not fit enough, just get out of here. If Novak were up 2-0, I don't think he would have retired 4-0 down in the fourth." For a young player trying to cement his place among the game's giants, that would have hurt. Comments from journalists or tennis fans questioning him were bad enough, but these were his peers, his idols, questioning his fitness now, calling out his toughness in public. The overall verdict was clear. Novak Djokovic was immensely talented but fragile, and in tennis, once that label sticks, it takes something extraordinary to shake it off. But if the world thought that ridicule would break him, they were wrong. In fact, despite all the noise after Melbourne, Novak Djokovic didn't fade away. Far from it. He went 78 wins and 19 losses in 2009, an elite record by any standard. He picked up 5 titles, made multiple finals, and finished the year ranked inside the top 3. But for all that consistency, there was something missing. At the Grand Slams, where the spotlight burned brightest, he kept falling short. Following his retirement from the Australian Open, a third-round loss followed at Roland Garros, a quarter-final ouster at Wimbledon, and a semi-final defeat at the US Open. Always close, but no cigar. The problem wasn't his talent. That was never in doubt. It was the endurance, the stamina, the ability to sustain brilliance over 5 sets. In the best-of-3 tour events, Djokovic looked unbeatable. In the best-of-5 marathons, he looked human. By 2010, the pattern was clear. 2 more ATP titles, plenty of wins, but the same roadblocks. He'd go deep at Grand Slams, fight hard, and then, against Federer or Nadal, hit a wall. No retirements, no excuses this time, but still no breakthrough. And that made the frustration even greater. He was too good to be dismissed, but not yet good enough to take over. For Novak Djokovic, this was purgatory, the space between potential and greatness. By early 2010, Novak Djokovic was chasing answers. He wasn't retiring anymore, but something was still holding him back. The endurance, the breathing, the stamina, especially in the long matches, remained elusive. It was through a mutual acquaintance back in Serbia that Djokovic was first introduced to Dr. Igor Četojević, a Serbian-born physician and nutritionist then based in Cyprus. Četojević had followed Djokovic's career and believed that his recurring breathing issues might be linked to diet rather than conditioning. He reached out, and Djokovic agreed to meet him later that year. That meeting happened in July 2010 during a Davis Cup tie in Croatia, and it would quietly change the course of his career. The turning point came when Dr. Igor administered a diagnostic test in late 2010. He asked Djokovic to stretch out his right arm while placing his left hand against his stomach. He applied downward pressure to the arm, asking Djokovic to resist. Under normal conditions, Djokovic's strength held. Then Dr. Igor had Djokovic repeat the same move, but this time with a slice of bread pressed against his stomach as he extended his arm. The moment the bread made contact, Djokovic's arm noticeably weakened. That, Dr. Igor argued, was proof of a gluten sensitivity, a bioenergetic signal that the body was reacting negatively to wheat. Soon after, Djokovic adopted a strict gluten-free diet, removing wheat, bread, pasta, many grains, and later dairy and other sensitivities that Dr. Igor identified. The effects were swift and profound. Within weeks, Djokovic felt lighter, more energetic, and less congested. He described waking up feeling refreshed, with less internal strain. That wasn't all. Dr. Igor's approach went beyond diet. It included breathing techniques, mindfulness practices, emotional balance, and adapting to environmental stressors as Djokovic traveled the globe. Over time, Djokovic himself came to see this shift as more than nutrition, as the missing link between potential and performance. In later interviews, he referred to that change as the X factor that brought his body into alignment. And from that moment on, Djokovic would never again be the same athlete, and neither would tennis. The results didn't arrive overnight for Djokovic, but once they did, they barely stopped. By the end of 2010, Novak Djokovic was moving differently, lighter, sharper, calmer. He was breathing easier, recovering faster, and above all, he believed in his body again. That belief showed on the biggest stage, the Davis Cup final against France in December 2010. Djokovic won both his singles matches, leading Serbia to its first ever Davis Cup title. It was more than a trophy. It was proof that his transformation was real. Earlier that season, Djokovic also made the final of the US Open, his first Grand Slam final since that Australian Open title in 2008. While he lost to Rafael Nadal, something seemed to have changed in him. And then came 2011, the season that changed everything. Djokovic opened the year with a statement. a straight sets demolition of Andy Murray in the Australian Open final. It was his second Grand Slam title, and the start of something historic. From January to June, he went on a 41-match winning streak, taking titles in Melbourne, Indian Wells, Miami, Madrid, and Rome. He beat Rafael Nadal 4 times in a row, twice on clay, the surface Nadal ruled. And when he defeated Wilfried Tsonga in the Wimbledon semifinals, he became the new world number 1. The kid who once couldn't finish matches was now unstoppable. The same body that had once betrayed him was now his greatest weapon. By the end of 2011, Djokovic had won 3 Grand Slams, the Australian Open, Wimbledon, and the US Open, and compiled a record of 70 wins to just 6 losses. He wasn't just winning, he was dominating legends at their peak. It wasn't just diet or fitness, it was conviction. He now trusted his process, every breath, every bite, every thought. The mockery had stopped, the doubt had vanished. Novak Djokovic had rewritten his own narrative. What began as a change in diet soon became something deeper. Novak Djokovic didn't just rebuild his body, he rewired his mind. He started talking about mindfulness, about breathing, about the power of thought. To many it sounded eccentric, but to Djokovic it was science of a different kind. He believed that food, air, emotion, and focus were all connected, that the body could only perform if the mind was in harmony. And the diet that started it all was no small sacrifice. Djokovic had grown up in Serbia, where his family owned a pizzeria. Bread, pasta, and cheese were part of his childhood, comfort food and family memories. To cut them out completely wasn't just discipline, it was transformation. Every element of his routine reflected that belief. Meditation in the morning, visualization before matches, deep breathing between points to slow his heart rate, and gratitude, constant gratitude, even in defeat. In a sport where players screamed at umpires, smashed rackets, and spiraled under pressure, Djokovic began to look strangely composed. The man once accused of fragility looked the most unbothered. When he saved 2 match points against Federer in the 2011 US Open semifinal, with fearless flat returns down the line, it wasn't luck. It was months of training his mind to trust the moment. He'd found balance, not just in tennis, but in life. And from that balance came dominance. In the space of 2 years, Novak Djokovic went from being the player everyone doubted to the man no one could beat. The retirements nearly stopped. The questions disappeared. What remained was a machine, one powered not by talent alone, but by self-awareness, discipline, and relentless belief. That hot afternoon in Melbourne in 2009 could have broken him. Instead, it became his origin story. The critics who once mocked his breathing now watched him control every inhale, every exhale, like a ritual. The players who once questioned his heart were now chasing his endurance, and the fans who once saw fragility saw only fire. He didn't just prove them wrong, he outlasted them, because that's the real Djokovic legacy, not just the titles, or the records, or the numbers that rewrite history books, but the reinvention itself, the courage to look inward when the world was laughing outward, to change everything, his habits, his body, his mind, and build something indestructible. In 2009, Novak Djokovic couldn't finish matches. By 2011, no one could finish him. By the time both Federer and Nadal retired, Novak would go on to clinch 24 Grand Slam titles, having notched up just 1 in the first 6 years of his career. And in many ways, it was that Australian Open retirement that changed Novak.